This is Open Mind Alexander Technique. I'm Jess. Today we're talking about the intersection between identity, artistry, and Alexander Technique. So many people think of Alexander Technique as being something about performing arts. So first we're going to talk about that a little bit. Why is that? And why is it that I teach at this point, 2 university music schools? Well, it came about because the original founder, ye old Mr. Alexander, was an actor. And so he just worked with a lot of stage performers and musicians, and it really stuck around in the performing arts world because it's quite easy to convince a stage performer that their habits influence their functioning and their end performance. For many performers, we tend to get that pretty quick. That concept is like, okay, yes, got it. Help, please. I find it is much more difficult to convince, say, an engineer that the way that they are interacting with their desk and their surroundings and themselves will impact the quality of the work that they're doing. But it absolutely does. Alexander Technique has really stayed prevalent in the performing arts world because it's just easier to get a foot in the door and get people to listen to say, hey, maybe the way that you are organizing yourself can be optimized, can be improved a little bit. Maybe we can look at the ways that we are carrying out our activities, and maybe we can do those daily activities a little bit better. As a result, a lot of Alexander Technique teachers like myself work mainly with performers. We also, in our private practices, will of course work with anyone who comes in the door, absolutely. They're all humans, and it's all just treated as any activity that you want to be able to do is just an application of your use of yourself. And many of us come from performing arts backgrounds ourselves because that's where we found out about it in the first place. So why do I teach at a university music school? Because I went to school here. This is really the end reason. It's because this is where I did my undergrad. This is where I first learned about Alexander Technique, and then later I came back as faculty. So when we're talking about artistry, I am part of encouraging young artists. I am part of the job within the teaching system of helping young artists find their voices and figure out who they are, what they're doing, and what they want to bring to the world. That also includes their habits of how they interact with all of their daily activities, including how they're talking to people, including how they talk to themselves. Those are, again, applications of noticing yourself and applying the basic components of Alexander Technique. Awareness of what's happening, preventing what you don't want, and encouraging what you do want. So how does identity fit into all this? Well, when I am teaching musicians, part of who they are and what they want to bring to their artistry is who they are as people. And if they are not acknowledged for who they are as people, how on earth are they going to find their own voices? How are they going to be able to work with their expression if their expression is being restrained? In Alexander Technique lessons, we talk a lot about permission, giving permission to yourself to take up room, to be honest with yourself about who you are, to be honest with the world about who you are, and permission to not have to hold yourself in all the time, both physically and figuratively. I was working today with a student on this, an opera singer, who's a grad student, and she was saying that throughout a lot of her undergrad, she was just too loud for a lot of ensembles and other groups, and so she really had to learn to hold back. And now part of her grad school experience is let it out. And she also found that there were a lot of parallels between how she's holding herself physically as she's thinking about, don't be too loud for everyone else. And she was holding herself in. And so in here we were working with giving permission to take up space physically and giving permission to take up space vocally and having that be okay. One of the additional things that Alexander Technique can help with is having people establish a skill set and a framework for self-regulation through uncomfortable situations, such as asking someone who they are, or receiving information about who someone is that maybe you're not used to, or is new, feels other. Being able to come back to, I'm still stable in myself. I can still ask my neck to not grab onto my head even when I'm having a difficult conversation. I can still notice my feet in contact with the floor. I can notice and allow the free movement of my breath when I'm hearing things that are difficult or new or unfamiliar. So now we're going to tie this all together. Part of my job as a music teacher, even though I'm not teaching music as part of my class, but I am faculty in university music departments, so in that regard, yes, I'm a music teacher as a kind of supplemental thing. When I work with musicians, if they aren't allowed to be themselves and know who they are being held back from being artists, which involves knowing who they are and being able to express who they are. Frequently in ways that might be difficult to express in words or in writing. Maybe they can do that through music. Maybe they can present this worldview that is unique and might be different than other people's worldview. And that's a good thing, of course it is. This is what artistry is about. So, when someone says their name and then tells you something like, here's the little word that I want you to use instead of my name when you refer to me in third person. Our title for those little words that you use instead of someone's name when you refer to them in third person, we call those pronouns. So my pronouns are she, her, hers, because those are the words that you use instead of my name, Jess, when you refer to me in third person. So for example, Jess goes to the store, she goes to the store. The she is verbally called a pronoun. Giving someone your pronouns is the absolute minimum level of information that you can give them about yourself. It's literally just, what's the little word to use instead of your name when I refer to you? That makes sure that you are respecting and acknowledging who they are as individuals. That musician over there, she's a singer. And if I use the wrong one, then I'm not really acknowledging who that person is. Hello, Editing Jess here. Welcome to my home. I realized when I was editing this video that I left out a major important point, and I want to make sure to at least include it now. One of the ways that we can tell that a particular habit of communication, such as a habit of language, like how we refer to someone, is a unique quirk of that language and that particular culture, rather than inherent to the human condition and being a human being, what we would consider like natural, is by looking at other cultures. See, how do other people do it? Or maybe even look at the history of our own language and how did we used to do it. So, a few different examples of that. One of the big things that is causing a whole bunch of people to make arguments in the US today is about the use of singular they. I'll put a link down in the description. Oxford English Dictionary traces this back, singular they, to the 1300s. So that has already changed within our own language. And if you talk to any linguist and watch any sort of, linguistics education content, tons of that is available online easily. Language changes all the time. And so getting mad about a language change is just getting mad about a particular habit that you don't want to change. Another example of a language change in our own use over time is you. So you is our second person singular pronoun. Again, a pronoun is the little word that we use in the place of our names when we refer to someone. We have several different pronouns. We've got first person in singular and plural, so that's I and we. We have second person pronouns, which are you, and you can also be plural, and y'all is also a second person plural pronoun. And then we have our third person pronouns, talking about that person over there. Our first and second person pronouns, both singular and plural, are all gender neutral in English. I is a gender neutral pronoun, we is a gender neutral pronoun, you is a gender neutral pronoun. You is an interesting one because it did not used to be singular. Thee and thou were the singular second person pronouns. You was only plural, so it basically was y'all, you guys, you plural, more than one of you was the only way that you was used. I in English, when I say I go to the store, that is a use of a pronoun, and it is gender neutral in English. It is not gender neutral in some other languages, such as Japanese. The reason that I know this is because when I was in middle school and high school, I read a whole lot of manga and watched a whole lot of anime. And they would occasionally have to put in a little editor's note in the manga, in the actual comic books, saying, this point isn't coming across well because in English you use the same word for I for anyone. And if they wanted to make a point about like woman I, which I think is watashi, versus men I, which was ore, that point couldn't get across in the writing. And so they put a little asterisk and editor's note, here's information. So I grew up, since I was rather young, knowing that I in English is gender neutral, but it's not in some other places. Another great example is how in modern English, our third person pronouns for objects is gender neutral. We use it for that. And our word for the is also gender neutral. In many other languages, such as Romance languages, it does not work like that. So in Spanish, for example, el and la both mean the. El is for masculine nouns, la is for feminine nouns. So like the chair, the table, you have to know the language structure for the gender of those nouns. So what I wanted to give is a little bit more context to how we can be open-minded with Open Mind Alexander Technique. Welcome, here we are. When we're talking about language habits, all we have to do is look outside of our own little circles to see that the way that we are used to doing things is just one possible option, and it is not the single correct way to do things. So as with any habit, we can look at that and make choices about how helpful is this habit, and is that maybe something that I want to change. When we have habits that are different across different people, different cultures, we can take that in and know that just like any habit, whether that's tensing my neck or a particular language construction that I am used to using, it's just a habit, and we can change that like any other habit. This is a relatively new thing, at least in American society, to introduce yourself with pronouns. And I think it's really a good thing, because what it does is it makes sure that people are being respected and acknowledged for who they are as individuals. So here we are. This is the intersection of identity, artistry, and looking at this through the lens of Alexander Technique. That if this is new, if this is unfamiliar, if it's scary or feels strange as part of our communication habits, well, I know how to work with habits. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher. I work with habits every day. When I'm faced with a new activity or any new stimulus is any information that comes into the brain, either internal or external. When I'm faced with a new stimulus, I can come back to my directions and ask for ease. Take a breath, right? These self-regulation tools. And I can think about analytically, what is this activity asking of me in terms of, is this a habit? Well, yes. Communication is part of our habits. How we habitually communicate through language is definitely under the realm of habitual activity. And in any habitual activity, you can use your skills through Alexander Technique to improve how you relate with that activity. I hope that this is a helpful lens to view a lot of the things that are going on in the US right now, where people are being hurt and persecuted and told that they are not allowed to be honest, and that they must be restrained, and they must be someone other than who they really are. So I encourage you, the next time someone tells you, here's who I am, here's the little word that you use to refer to me in third person, you can just say, okay, got it. Here's who I am. That little word doesn't tell you anything about how that person thinks about their gender or their expression or anything. It's literally just, what's the little word that we use instead of someone's name to refer to them? And we can use our skills through Alexander Technique to make sure that we stay regulated and we stay aware of how our habits impact both ourselves and other people. We can move through the world in a positive way by checking in with unintended side effects of our habits, such as if a habitual communication is making someone feel like they can't be honest with you, or they can't be honest about who they really are as individuals, as artists. Are you actually asking someone to compress themselves? Can you instead come back to, I can ask my neck to not grab onto my head. I can still take air in and out. I've got my feet on the floor. And I acknowledge logically, communication is a habit. And we can work towards healthier, more authentic communication when we acknowledge who our neighbors are and what are all the wonderful things that our neighbors can bring to our communities, whether they're artists or people who aren't artists, right? Someone who works at the grocery store. They're still people. They still have names, and they all have pronouns. We can use our skills of self-regulation to make sure that we are interacting with our world in a way that is constructive.